We told Dre, hey, we finna beat up TQ tonight because he was taking our time slot where he was coming in. I think he paid to go on tour. You know what I'm saying? So when he was doing his time, the audience was packed, but he was an R&B singer. I think it was in New York. We came out on his set. So Dre started telling us, hey, you gonna come out the liquor store at this point. He started organizing, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So he made it to a way to where we was gonna come out on his set. That would have been dope, but it got...
In the world of hip-hop, very few names carry both platinum plaques and real street weight. Tracy Lamar Davis, better known as Big Tray Deee, is one of those rare few. He wasn't just another rapper chasing fame, he was the life he rhymed about. Every lyric came straight from experience, every bar echoed truth. From the blocks of Long Beach to the heights of hip-hop royalty, Trey D earned respect the hard way. No gimmicks, no shortcuts. Born April 27, 1966 in Long Beach, California, Trey D came up in an environment where loyalty wasn't just a word, it was law. The streets taught him early that weakness could cost you everything. He wasn't pretending to be tough. He was tough, molded by a world where survival meant being sharper, faster, and more loyal than the next man. By the time he picked up a mic, Trey D had already earned his stripes in the neighborhood. People knew him not as a talker, but as a doer, someone who stood on his word and didn't fold under pressure. His reputation wasn't for show, it was solid.
You know Big Tray Deee stay heavy every time.
That's the real Tray Deee.
I didn't know that.
That's the real Tray Deee.
Just got out of 10.
Incident in 2003, which ultimately led to your prison sentence.
Yes.
I mean, now that you've served your time, can you talk about what happened back then?
It was actually something that was caused by just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was some guys in Long Beach that tried to step on my toes, and it's just something that just flared up. You know?
When he rapped about the struggle, folks listened because they knew he'd lived it. When Snoop Dogg linked up with Trey D and Goldilocks to form Tha Eastsidaz, it felt like the West Coast had just been recharged. These weren't studio gangsters. They were authentic voices of Long Beach. Their sound was soaked in real-life stories, heavy bass lines, and that undeniable West Coast bounce. And just like that, Trey D became more than a local name. He became a symbol of the city itself. Tha Eastsidaz blew up quick. One album went platinum, another went gold, and fans couldn't get enough of their chemistry. But behind all that shine, there was real tension brewing under the surface. The same street code that made Trey D a respected OG also kept him tied to the kind of loyalty that could turn dangerous fast. His authenticity became both his strength and his curse. He stood by his people no matter what, and that kind of loyalty can come with a heavy price. In a world where respect rules everything, even a small misunderstanding can turn into a full-blown storm. And Trey D's life was about to prove it. Before the fame, he wasn't chasing radio hits. He was focused on survival and honor. The lessons he learned on those Long Beach streets never left him. Handle your problems directly, never fake it, never fold. That mindset would follow him into the rap game, and eventually into the darkest chapter of his career. Trey D wasn't one of those artists trying to reinvent themselves for the industry. What people saw on camera was who he really was off it, calm when needed, ruthless when pushed. That mix of wisdom and intensity made him stand out in a crowded era of West Coast legends. But trouble doesn't care about success. Even as his fame grew, the streets never stopped calling. And when loyalty gets tested in Long Beach, somebody always pays the price. For Trey D, that test came hard and fast, a confrontation that would pull him off stage and straight into the courtroom. By 2003, Big Tray Deee wasn't just a rapper. He was the definition of Long Beach authenticity. Platinum records, legendary features with Dr. Dre, and a rep that stretched from the studio to the streets. His status was untouchable. But fame doesn't erase history, and in Trey D's world, loyalty could flip into violence in a heartbeat. That year, everything changed. On November 20th, 2003, what started as a heated confrontation on the streets of Long Beach turned into a scene straight out of a movie. Words got exchanged, tempers flared, and before anyone knew it, shots rang out. No one was killed, but the law came down hard. Trey D was arrested and charged with attempted murder, assault, and possession of a firearm, even though nobody had been seriously injured. Prosecutors didn't treat it like a small fight. They went all in. They painted him as a dangerous figure, not a rapper defending himself, and pushed for a shocking 122-year sentence. That's right, 122 years. It was a message from the system. Being a respected street figure in Los Angeles County came with a target on your back. Trey D's rise had been fast, but his fall hit even faster. The Eastsidaz were still hot in the streets with gold and platinum plaques stacking up. But behind closed doors, things were breaking apart. There were whispers of a royalty dispute between Trey D and Snoop Dogg, and the talk got loud. The rumors said over $1 million in unpaid royalties were on the line, money that Trey D believed he rightfully earned from his hard work and contributions. For a man who lived by principle, being played for money wasn't something he could let slide. For almost 2 years, Trey D tried to handle the issue peacefully, hoping to get what was his without turning it into street drama. But when talk stalled, he finally decided to take it straight to the source, Snoop himself. When Trey D pulled up to Snoop's house to confront him, things got tense. He later claimed Snoop ran out and jumped in his truck instead of facing him head on. That moment only fueled the tension. The very next day, reports said things exploded. People connected to Snoop allegedly fired first, and Trey D returned fire. The shootout that followed became the foundation of the Long Beach case that would take down one of the West Coast's most respected names. Suddenly, the unity that once defined the Eastsidaz shattered. The streets were talking, rumors were spreading, and the brotherhood between sets from Long Beach started to fracture. What had begun as music built on respect and loyalty had turned into open warfare, legal and personal. Facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars, Trey D had no choice but to take a plea deal in 2005. He accepted a 12-year prison sentence, a massive fall for a man who had gone from the block to hip-hop royalty. Just like that, his booming career came to a halt during his prime years. But even behind bars, his legend didn't fade. To the people who knew him, Trey D wasn't just a rapper. He was a symbol of loyalty, respect, and raw honesty. While some rappers hired muscle to protect their image, Trey D was the muscle, and the brains behind it too. He handled business directly, never hiding behind fame or security. And though the media loved to paint him as another gangster gone wrong, the truth ran deeper. This wasn't a man chasing chaos. This was someone who lived by a strict code, one that didn't always fit neatly into a courtroom. When the Eastsidaz hit the scene, it felt like the old West Coast energy had come back to life. Snoop Dogg, Goldie Lock, and Big Tray Deee weren't just rapping. They were representing the whole city of Long Beach. Their sound had that smooth G-funk bounce mixed with street grit, and fans couldn't get enough. Their first album went platinum, the second one gold, and the streets had them on repeat. It looked like unity, money, and success were finally walking hand in hand. But behind the scenes, cracks were already forming. For Trey D, loyalty was everything. He believed in fairness, respect, and keeping things solid between brothers. But the music business doesn't always play by street rules. When the money started flowing, so did the questions. And before long, rumors started flying about missing royalties and unpaid earnings. Trey D claimed that he and Goldie Lock were shorted out of over $1 million in royalties from the Eastsidaz projects. Imagine that. You help build an empire only to find out the paperwork doesn't match the promises. And the wildest part? He said the group only ever saw a small advance while the label cashed in big time. As if that wasn't enough, another story hit the streets, one that really made people's jaws drop. Reports claimed that Snoop had actually charged the Eastsidaz for the gold chains they wore in one of their music videos, writing it off as a business expense instead of giving them as gifts. That move didn't sit right with Trey D at all. To him, that wasn't business. That was a betrayal of trust. When you come from loyalty, things like that hit deeper than contracts ever could. Still, Trey D didn't rush to violence. He tried to settle it like a man, giving the situation almost 2 years to get worked out quietly. But nothing changed. No paperwork, no payout, no resolution. And when you mix patience with pride, something eventually breaks. Fed up, Trey D decided to take it straight to Snoop's front door. He confronted him face to face at his home, demanding answers and respect. But instead of a calm talk between brothers, things went sideways fast. Trey D later said that Snoop bolted out the house and jumped in his truck, avoiding the confrontation completely. That moment was the final straw. The next day, things got hot. Reports spread that people connected to Snoop had fired first, and Trey D fired back. A few seconds of chaos would change everything. That exchange became the core of the Long Beach shooting case, the same one that led to Trey Dee's 12-year sentence. What was supposed to be a business disagreement had turned into a street war that tore the Eastsidaz apart. The brotherhood they built, gone. The unity between rival Long Beach sets that Trey D helped create, shattered. The money they fought over became the very reason their legacy fractured. But even through it all, Trey D never changed his stance. He stood tall on what he believed in, respect over riches. He once said loyalty meant more than fame ever could. And that's why, even as the industry moved on without him, the streets never stopped saying his name. Trey D's story showed the dark side of the rap game, how quick the industry can turn friends into foes when money's involved. But unlike most, he didn't run from the fallout. He faced it head on, the same way he handled everything else, with principle and pride.
2 years.
Yes, for gang, I was facing 50 years on gang allegations alone, and that's a charge they have for gang members.
Trey D ended up having to do some time in prison for
shooting that drunk and not, but I'm just saying he was, and he shot us.
When Big Tray Deee walked into the California prison system in 2005, he wasn't some broken man facing the end of his life. He was a soldier walking into another battlefield. The headlines called him a gangster rapper doing time for attempted murder, but the people who knew him understood something deeper. Trey D was built for pressure, and even behind bars, he carried himself like the OG he'd always been. 12 years is a long time to sit down. For most artists, that would have been career suicide, a death sentence for fame and legacy. But for Trey D, prison became a refining fire. He didn't fold, he learned, he adapted, and he kept building his legend from the inside. Locked in one of California's toughest facilities, Trey D saw the system for what it was, designed to bury men who came from his world. Instead of letting it crush him, he made the time work for him. He wrote every day, studied law, mentored younger inmates, and kept his mind razor sharp. While most people were waiting for his story to end, he was writing the next chapter. Even from behind bars, his influence in the streets never disappeared. In Long Beach and across the West Coast, his name still carried weight. Younger rappers looked up to him, quoting his verses and repping his legacy like he was still free. To them, Trey D wasn't just a rapper, he was a blueprint for realness. In interviews from prison, Trey D stayed honest about his mistakes. He never played the victim card. He admitted that his pride and temper got him caught up, but made it clear he wasn't ashamed of living by his code. He told one interviewer, "I made choices, some right, some wrong, but everything I did, I stood on it. That's what being a man means." That attitude, raw, unapologetic, and grounded, earned him even more respect. Fans started calling him one of the last real ones, because while others built fake personas, Trey D had already lived the life most rappers only rapped about. Inside, he became a mentor figure. Dozens of younger inmates said he helped them think differently, teaching them about discipline, business, and using their voices instead of violence. He told them the same thing he'd tell anyone on the outside. You can't lead with anger forever. You gotta lead with purpose. He didn't just talk change, he lived it. While serving time, Trey D started writing books. His first published work, Streets Gone Crazy, came out while he was still locked up. It was gritty, intelligent, and full of the kind of real storytelling that made his music legendary. The novel proved that his creativity didn't stop at bars, literal or lyrical. By the late 2000s, hip-hop had shifted. The West Coast sound had evolved, new stars had emerged, but Trey D's name never faded. From interviews to shout-outs and songs, his legacy stayed alive. He was like a myth, the OG who kept his head high while the industry turned soft. In 2014, after serving nearly a decade, Big Tray Deee finally walked free. The world he stepped back into had changed, but he hadn't. He came home older, sharper, and more focused. Reporters expected bitterness. Instead, they found peace. Trey D said freedom wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about using his story to guide others away from the same mistakes. He told fans, "I did my time like a man. Now I'm back to do what I was meant to do, tell the truth." When Big Tray Deee stepped out of those prison gates in 2014, the West Coast felt it like a shockwave. The same man they'd once locked away walked out a legend, calm, sharper than ever, and ready to reclaim his voice. The streets had been waiting on him. Fans who grew up bumping the Eastsidaz classics had spent a decade calling for his return. And when he came home, he didn't disappoint. But this wasn't the same Trey D who went in back in 2005. The fire was still there, that energy, that authority. But now it was mixed with wisdom. He wasn't chasing validation anymore, he was setting an example. He came out not just as a rapper, but as a mentor, writer, and living proof that growth can come even from the darkest places. The first thing Trey D did after touching down was reconnect with his roots. He linked back up with Goldie Lock, his Eastsidaz brother, and soon after, the two dropped new music that had fans buzzing. They didn't try to sound like the younger wave. They stayed true to the real West Coast flavor, heavy bass lines, slick talk, and that signature Long Beach attitude that no one else could duplicate.
Tell the truth. That's why they didn't want to let Long Beach in the game, because they wasn't getting it back. We greedy. We want it all. We want it all.
Around that same time, Trey D jumped on the remix of Can't Stop Us, showing the world that prison hadn't dulled his pen one bit. His flow was sharp, his delivery confident, and his presence reminded everyone why he was one of the most respected OGs to ever touch a mic. But what really made his comeback special wasn't just the music, it was the message. Trey D started using his platform to teach. He began speaking publicly about his prison experience, about how pride and ego can destroy your path if you let them run wild. He told the youth straight up, "Don't mistake being real for being reckless." Those words hit deep, especially coming from someone who had lived both sides of that truth. He also started collaborating with new generation artists, not to chase clout, but to guide them. From Long Beach locals to upcoming rappers around LA, Trey D became that big homie everyone respected, the one who could still out-rap you and out-think you in the same breath. He wasn't afraid to tell young artists the harsh truth about the game either. The fame fades fast, but your name and your choices last forever. At the same time, Trey D began working on his autobiography and more novels, proving that his creativity wasn't limited to the mic. His second book, Streets Still Crazy, continued where his first left off. Real stories, real lessons, no filters. Readers said it felt like listening to him rap, only this time with pages instead of beats. What stood out most was Trey D's attitude towards Snoop Dogg after all the past tension. Reporters tried to stir up old drama, but Trey D handled it with maturity. He didn't go on rants or throw shade. He said time had changed him. He made it clear he wasn't holding grudges anymore. His focus was on peace, progress, and purpose. He told one interviewer, "We can't keep letting the past define us. I learned that the hard way. If I'm free now, I gotta move like a free man, not a prisoner still fighting ghosts." Those words hit like a sermon. Coming from Trey D, they carried weight. In his interviews and podcasts, fans saw a new kind of OG. Still tough, still witty, but wise enough to use his scars as lessons for others. He had evolved from a street general into a teacher of the culture. By the time the 2020s rolled around, Big Tray Deee had gone from street legend to cultural pillar. His name wasn't just whispered in Long Beach anymore. It was spoken with respect across every corner of the West Coast. Younger rappers who'd grown up on his music called him Unk, not because of age, but because of authority. When Trey D talked, people listened. His legacy wasn't built on awards or flashy headlines. It came from authenticity. He was one of the last of a dying breed, artists who didn't separate their art from their truth. Everything he rapped about, he lived. That's why when he spoke about loyalty, sacrifice, and survival, the streets nodded in agreement. He'd earned that voice. What made Trey D so different was his ability to evolve without ever selling out. While trends came and went, he stayed grounded in the raw Long Beach sound, that mix of G-funk, grit, and wisdom. And yet, his music still connected with a new generation that had never even seen the 90s. They felt his words because they came from experience, not marketing. But Trey D's influence reached far past the booth. He became one of the West Coast's strongest mentors, guiding upcoming artists like a real OG should. He told them straight, "Don't let fame make you forget who fed you before the cameras showed up." That message cut through the noise of social media culture and reminded artists that character mattered more than clout. He started appearing on podcasts, panels, and interviews, not chasing attention but spreading game. Whenever Trey D spoke on hip-hop politics or street ethics, the comment sections lit up. People respected his balance. He could talk about gang life one minute, then switch to business advice the next. He made it clear that being from the streets didn't mean staying trapped there. Trey D also played a major role in bridging old school and new school West Coast energy. He linked up with younger acts like RJ, AD, and G Perico, offering them wisdom while hopping on tracks that showed he still had bars sharper than most of the game. He moved like a big brother to the entire scene, never hating, just motivating. And the culture noticed. From the Breakfast Club to No Jumper, hosts and fans kept calling him the realest voice left. His interviews went viral because he spoke truth with no ego. When asked about how he stayed relevant, Trey D said it simple. Real don't expire. If you built on truth, your story lasts forever. He wasn't lying. His old verses aged like scripture, raw, bold, and brutally honest. Songs like Get Up and Got Beef still hit with that same fire years later because they captured more than music. They captured a mindset. And every artist coming out of Long Beach carried a little bit of Trey D's DNA in their flow. But beyond rap, he started putting energy into the community that raised him. He spoke at youth programs, helped with re-entry initiatives for ex-inmates, and even set up creative workshops where young writers could learn how to turn their pain into art. He told them, if I can come back from 12 years gone, you can come back from anything. That's what made him special. Trey D wasn't just surviving the game, he was rewriting what survival looked like. He proved that a man could be feared and respected, street and spiritual, flawed and still full of purpose. By living his truth out loud, Big Tray Deee had become something bigger than a rapper. He was a mirror for every hustler trying to find redemption. His story reminded everyone that realness might get you scars, but it also earns you forever respect. When the story of Big Tray Deee gets told, it's not just about rap. It's about resilience, redemption, and the kind of loyalty that never bends. From the rough streets of Long Beach to platinum records and prison bars, Trey D walked through every chapter with his chin high and his code intact. In a culture that celebrates temporary fame, his consistency became legendary. See, most rappers fade when the spotlight dies. But Trey D's power didn't come from cameras, it came from character. His life taught a truth the industry often ignores. Respect lasts longer than relevance. You can lose money, freedom, or fame, but if you keep your integrity, your name still rings out. He built his life on that foundation: loyalty over ego, respect over clout, truth over image. Those weren't slogans, they were his rules for survival. Even when those same values landed him behind bars, he never switched up. He once said in an interview, "I've done time, but I never did no backtracking. I stood tall because I knew who I was." And that's why, even now, younger artists and OGs alike still see him as the blueprint. His story became a lesson in accountability, proof that a man can make mistakes, take his punishment, and still walk out with his head high. In his later years, Trey D started talking more about transformation, not the kind that gets you magazine covers, but the kind that saves your soul. He told crowds, growth ain't soft, it's gangsta to evolve. Those words carried weight because they came from someone who'd lived the full spectrum, from the corner to the charts to the cell. His interviews kept going viral because he spoke from a place of earned wisdom. When he talked about the street code, he didn't glorify it, he explained it. He broke down how loyalty can protect you or destroy you, depending on how you use it. He reminded people that being real doesn't mean being reckless. It means being responsible for the people who look up to you. And that's what made Trey D's comeback special. It wasn't about revenge or reclaiming a throne. It was about turning his journey into a guidebook. He became a living reminder that no matter how deep you fall, you can still rise with purpose. Every bar he spit, every word he wrote, every interview he gave, it all carried that same message. Stand on what you believe, but never stop learning. The new generation of Long Beach artists, from Vince Staples to Juba Locke, still carry his energy in their art. His influence is woven into the DNA of West Coast culture. You can hear it in the tone, the attitude, and the stories they tell. They all move with that same Trey D precision, calm, confident, and unapologetically real. But ask anyone close to him and they'll tell you his proudest legacy isn't the records or the fame. It's the lives he touched, the people he mentored, and the lessons he left behind. Trey D turned survival into strategy. He took pain and turned it into purpose. He proved that growth doesn't erase your past, it redefines it, and that's what makes him timeless. Decades after his first rhyme and years after his prison time, Big Tray Deee still stands tall, the voice of truth in a world full of illusions. His name doesn't just echo in rap, it echoes in every story about integrity, loyalty, and transformation. So when people talk about West Coast legends, Snoop, Dre, Cube, and the rest, make no mistake, Trey D's name belongs right there with them. Because while others made hits, he made history. His story ends where it began, in Long Beach, surrounded by loyalty, respect, and an unbreakable code that no sentence, no rumor, and no betrayal could ever destroy. Big Tray Deee, forever real, forever respected.